My way, or the highway, and in the driveway is a nice range. Cause I grind through the climb, I invite pain. You'll never hear me, bitch, nah, I don't complain. Just gotta flip the switch and you can go and obtain anything you want, anything you need. Your mind's got the key ingredient, it's belief. They deceive with the negativity, but I just slide right by that energy. Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.
What's up? Welcome back to the Gallop Out.
I'm confused why that's the banner picture, but whatever.
Because it's Mixto, man. If there's no bigger Mixto fans in this world besides you and me, I don't know who else he's got in his corner. Mixto and Rank, we got to be 1-2 in that fan club. After that, the N1X victory. I'm sorry, the Pacific Classic victory last summer at Del Mar. No, just obviously a good poke of fun at our friends the O'Neills. Anyway, this is the Gallop Out. We are back one more time tonight with another live show. We'll be going through the Distaff, the Turf, and the Classic. Of course, Jackson, you and I have had a long day today. We had Tony Kalo on. We had Megan Burgess on, Matt Dinnerman. Prior to that, it was Racing Rachel M. from Horseshoe Indy, and Eric DeCoster kicked us off on this one. And, of course, for the finale, we have Matt Bernier. Matt, thank you for joining us. You're out on Pacific Coast time this time, so it's a little bit earlier for you. How's the flight out? And obviously, I know you're excited for Breeders' Cup once again at Del Mar.
Yep, flight was a little bit on the rocky side, rockier than what I would like anyway for a 6.5-hour flight. But good news is we're here in one piece, and the fields are drawn. Now it's just a matter of getting to the big show and seeing how everything unfolds. Sounds like you guys have had a busy day, though, leading into this. So I feel bad that I'm the one that's got to kind of wrap things up for you.
No, please. That's the most exciting part of our day, and this is fun. I know Jackson will say the exact same thing. This has been so much fun talking with so many different guests from the racing world, whether they're racetrack announcers like Tony Kalo and Matt Dinnerman, analysts like Rachel McLaughlin, or our fellow handicappers like Eric DeCoster, and then of course we have you, and you're a little bit of all of them. Actually, I haven't heard you call a race yet, but hopefully we'll get that sometime in the future.
If that ever happens, something has gone seriously wrong, because I don't have the chops that those folks do. The men and women that call races, they do. It is, I would put it right next to the morning line maker, the most thankless job in racing. So I don't envy their position. They all do great jobs, and let's just hope that I never have to do that.
Yes, those are two of the most thankless jobs in racing. You are not wrong there. So you were at the Pacific Coast, or the Breeders' Cup draw party last night, the post position draw for all 14 races that are going to take place this Friday and Saturday. Just quick takeaways, 30 seconds. What's maybe the best post draw of the Breeders' Cup card, and maybe who got the shortest end of the stick?
Well, I think as far as the beneficiaries, I would look at the turf and say kind of the two main players in there. I don't think their draws really hinder them at all. Rebels Romance on the inside, Mini Hawk right there in the middle. They both figure to be relatively forwardly placed. I think Rebels Romance has an outside chance to make the lead down from the inside, but I think they're kind of winners in that you're not going to really have an excuse as far as the draw is concerned for either of them. Conversely, I mean, we kind of have to talk about the Classic, right? Yeah, it seemed, I mentioned it when we were talking about it, it seemed impossible that Fierceness would end up down there again, and here we were down to the final two, and it's he and Sovereignty, and unfortunately for Mike Rapoli and Todd Pletcher and everyone, he draws the one hole again. I think I was all in on him coming into this week. I just thought everything about this horse set up perfectly. This racetrack seemingly is where he's at his best. And now with contrary thinking in the 4-hole and him down on the rail, I'm inclined to go against him just because I think it's that important. And I know that may sound silly in a 10-horse field, or we hope it's 10 horses, but I think he's got his work cut out for him to pull something. And it's one thing to do it in the Pacific Classic, guys. You know this as well as I do. That field was good, not great. It's a totally different animal to do it against this group on Saturday. Just this field top to bottom. There's no weak points.
No, there's not. And you have every type of run style. Nobody's, Fierceness's one advantage prior to the Rabbit, I guess, was the pace. He had whether it was loose on the lead or he's going to be that prominent kind of pace factor behind Contrary Thinking now. But now down on the rail, you have Nevada Beach to your outside. He's shown some speed, and you'd imagine that they're going to try and get him in some aggressive positioning and Contrary Thinking, as you mentioned, from the 4-hole. So it does complicate things quite a bit. And while handicappers might not think that the rail maybe is the biggest detriment if you do believe in Fierceness's talent, it's certainly not a vote of confidence when, you have an interview with Todd Pletcher and he is adamant that he does not want the rail again. That can't be a vote of confidence if you are a Fierceness supporter.
Well, and all, I think from purely Chad Brown said all the right things. He's certainly not going to sit here and say the Contrary Thinking is in it to run interference or anything like that. He's in it for one reason and one reason only. That's to make sure that there's pace. And I believe all that. But at the same time, you can look at it and say, if you're Florent Giroux, you're going to break out of the 4-hole. Just maintain your path. Don't do anything silly. Just run straight. Fierceness tries to come up. You can make things a little bit tight on him. If Johnny is intent on trying to go, you go even faster. If he's trying to back, you can really make life difficult for that horse down on the inside without doing anything wrong. So it's a tough spot to be in if you're John Velasquez. I don't know what the right call is. I don't know if you got to stand on the gas pedal early on and try to get into a drag race with Contrary Thinking, or you got to try to bide your time and get out. But then to your point, Ryan, you've got other horses right in that vicinity that have got good tactical speed too. I just think they're in a really tough spot down there.
Yeah, it is going to be a tough spot. But hey, if anybody was going to navigate that, it is the Hall of Famer Johnny Velasquez, who has been unconscious at that Keeneland meet. He was popping at prices left, right, and center. It was unbelievable to see the resurgence that he had during that stint at Keeneland during the fall meet. But let's get into this Saturday's races. We're going to talk 3 main races. We're going to talk the Breeders' Cup Distaff, the Breeders' Cup Turf, and of course the Breeders' Cup Classic, where we just talked about one of those runners. But we'll kick it off with the Breeders' Cup Distaff. We're going a 1.125 miles over the dirt course for 3-year-olds, fillies, and mares, 3-year-olds and upward. Nitrogen drew the rail, which I thought was a little bit interesting. She's never taken kickback, a point that my co-host Jackson Muniz brought up. Obviously, some defections in here in Torpedo Anna, retiring. Cavalieri, who just beat Ricci in a race that is escaping my memory right now. But Cavalieri would also been a top contender in here. Now you have Seismic Beauty, who, in my opinion, do very, very well at post position 8. So we'll start the conversation there. Obviously, she's very fast early, and there's not a whole lot of early speed in here. Do you see anybody that's going to go with her early, and how do you kind of view the pace scenario?
Logically, she is the controlling pace in here. But I will say, from a draw standpoint, while I don't think she is as talented as Seismic Beauty, Jinjin has one way to go. If she's going to win this race, they've got to go. I happened to interview Brendan Walsh after Jinjin won the Spinster, and he said, the plan always was to be forward with her, and I can't imagine the plan would be any different here. I maintain she's not as talented as some of the top flight fillies and mares in here, and she may just have a real affinity for Keeneland. But Jinjin at least makes Seismic Beauty's job a little bit more difficult early on. I think there are a couple other fillies in here that might be aggressively ridden. I think the filly toward the outside, Dry Powder, can't help but be relatively close to the front end. I don't think Darth Vader wants to come from too far out of it. So I guess it's a little bit of a long-winded way of answering your question. I think Seismic Beauty ticks all the boxes as far as the buyers are concerned. She's got the 2 fastest last out numbers in the field. But having said that, on Thoroughgraph, she's not nearly as fast as some of the other horses in this race. She's not even the fastest. So I like her. I don't love her. I went into this distaff thinking I was going to be all in on Seismic Beauty. And then I started looking a little bit more and I said, you know what? I don't know that I'm going to go down that road. And I think this could be a little bit of a chaos race, frankly.
Chaos certainly wouldn't be new to this race. We saw in 2021, Marks Lorraine absolutely blew it up after Latrusca was dueling on the front end, went something like 44 to the half. And after that, you knew it was pretty much over. But something we've noticed about Del Mar, and Noah, Maher, Jackson, and myself did this over on the Pacific Horse Players on the HHH Racing Channel, was we went over the track trends for Del Mar and where you need to be and when you need to be there. And Marks Lorraine even had the lead turning for home. And really, when you get to the top of the stretch, a horse within a length of the lead or on the lead, that's pretty much your winner right there. I think would be fair to say 9 times out of 10 with the way that the Del Mar stretch only being 919 feet. It's not the longest. There's not a whole lot of room to make up that needed ground. So making that aggressive move around the turn is certainly the key to winning this race. And a horse like Seismic Beauty, well, yeah, maybe those speed figures do tower over. If you look at some other figures that aren't the buyer, she doesn't have that big of an edge. who's the horse that you anticipate kind of making that move to try and really get into contention, could even have the lead turning for home and maybe cause some trouble for the favorite?
Well, I think Nitrogen's going to be in a good position. And, I came into the race looking at Seismic Beauty, and I said, well, if it's not her, I want to give Nitrogen a look. And I'm curious on both your takes on this filly, because I went back and watched that spinster, and I'm still struggling to find out how she didn't win. I mean, at the top of the lane, she's in a really nice spot, and she got a little bit drifty toward the very end. I know the pace was fast that day, but I thought she was supposed to go on by, and maybe she's just kind of incrementally taking those steps forward, and she takes another big step forward on Saturday. But with the inside draw, combined with the fact that I wish I had seen a better finish in that final 16th of a mile at Keeneland. I didn't want to go her direction either, but I think she's going to be right there making her move. I think Scylla's going to be relatively close as well around the far turn. I guess I'll ask you guys, Jackson and Ryan, the idea that, am I crazy? The pace scenario, I think, is one of those that initially it looked like Seismic Beauty could just coast on the front. But now with the other fillies that I had already mentioned going, I think this thing could melt down. Maybe I'm being way over the top here, but I think something goofy could happen in here. And I take your point. I think it's a credible one, the idea that you need to be basically on the lead at the top of the lane. But I could see a scenario where this thing completely melts and you've got somebody swinging wide off the far turn, coming from 5 or 6 lengths out of it and just eating up the ground and getting up in the shadow of the wire.
Jackson, your thoughts first.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly could. I haven't been shy about how much I like Seismic Beauty in this race. I do like that she drew outside of the horses it seems like are going to contest the pace, because if someone wants to go absolutely nuts, then sure, she can probably just sit second, hopefully. She hasn't really proven that yet, but I would think if they're going quick enough, she'll be okay. But you raise a good point. If it's not just Scottish Lassie, what if it's Scylla and Scottish Lassie and someone like Dry Powder, and all of a sudden you have 4 horses dueling on the front end, and we see something like we saw in 2021 where they just went absolutely nuts on the front end, and it can just really open up this race for someone else. I don't view that as a super likely scenario, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, I share Jackson, where I don't think that's the most likely scenario where we could see a meltdown. But if we do see jockeys get aggressive in here, like I do believe Scylla is at her best going 2 turns and maybe up towards the lead. Maybe not on the lead, but certainly I don't think that would hurt her. Because it's a tough scenario to imagine that she's going to run down a horse like Seismic Beauty or really anybody else when she hasn't quite shown that tenacity coming down the finish. So maybe getting her to the lead is maybe her best shot at winning. But a horse like Nitrogen, after that last performance, I feel like she should have gone by, and she kind of found every reason not to. That being said, I feel like if this pace were to get pressured early, I think the underexposed horse is kind of Clicquot, where she's been really professional in her 3-year-old season, and she does like to have that target in front of her. I mean, she's won her last 4 races straight. She's progressed really nicely, going from the maiden breaking performance into an optional claiming, non-one other than, and then the grade 3 at Indiana, then the grade 1 Cotillion, and she's progressed each and every time, and she's shown that professionalism. So maybe she's that underexposed horse. You get Flavien Prat, who obviously is one of the best jockeys that we could see out here on the West Coast, especially on the dirt. So if things do melt down, Clicquot, I think, is that option for me, but I'm still Seismic Beauty pretty strongly up top.
Yeah, I think Seismic Beauty is clearly the likeliest winner. And I know sometimes folks don't like to hear the phrases likeliest winner, who you may or may not bet, things like that. But I think that's really what this game is all about. You need to wait and see what the off odds are, what we hopefully have as far as off odds are concerned, and then go from there. Let the tote board be your guide. While we can sit here and say, I like X, Y, and Z, if for whatever reason Seismic Beauty goes off at 6-5, well, I would like to think that, maybe there's some reconsideration about actually who the bet is in there. As far as Clicquot goes, that Cotillion, I just wish it were a little bit of a cleaner race. Dry Powder was the only pace around at the end of it. You had a couple of horses come from off the pace, and they were picking up some pieces. I agree with you. She is unexposed. If you're looking for kind of the fresh face, the horse that you don't know what she may or may not be, she may take another jump forward, it would probably be her. The only other 2 horses I'll mention, and I know you said you weren't looking for picks per se, but as I kept going through this race, I don't want the short prices at the prices they're likely to be. I looked at Sarawak Rim. I have no idea what she was running against down in Argentina. It seems like she's training fairly well. The fact that Arad is here for Nacho Correas, and this is Nacho's kind of swan song, wrapping things up, I think she's mildly intriguing. but I'm going to give you the horse that I'm going to pick on Saturday, and I don't care if I look like a fool after it's over. I'm going to go to Alice Verite. You want to talk about, in my opinion, a race that is going to be run 180 degrees difference from last year. Last year, they just lined up, and it was basically a merry-go-round. Broke poorly, and I think that's something that if you haven't really looked at any of the races from Japan, granted they're all on turf, she's a horse that can be forward. As a matter of fact, in Victoria Mile earlier this year, she's about 10 clear down the backside, and she very nearly holds on. I don't think she's going to be that fast, even if she breaks well. She's not going to be among the pace setters. But she showed that once she got into the clear in that Distaff last year, she came with a run at the end. Is she the likeliest winner? Not by a long shot, but she's going to be every bit of 20-1. And if this thing does heat up, she's at least shown a willingness to run on. If I don't like the short prices, I'm not going to just settle by picking one of them. I'll take an absolute stab in the dark here with Alice Verite.
I love it, and thanks for giving your picks with us. I know I didn't ask for those, but happy to get them if you have them ready. Alice Verite, obviously, I'm not going to talk you off of a massive price. Kyle Frey retains the mount from last year, and she did do some a fair amount of running late. I liked your point on Sarawak Rim. That's a tough one to say. I don't envy Larry Colmus's position calling that one down the stretch, but. Nacho Correa's final kind of swan song in the United States, as you mentioned, you get the likes of Irad. So that's not to be ignored. And she seems to be training very well. But again, this is Breeders' Cup. They all, they're all training pretty well down here as they should be. Question from Jim Pillars before we move to the Breeders' Cup turf. What's the shortest price we would take on Seismic Beauty in the Breeders' Cup Distaff? Jackson, I'll turn it over to you.
Ooh. I think even money I would take. I just think she's so much better than these horses. I think for me, the problem is Nitrogen being second choice in here. I think she's just no good at all. Like I'm not even sure she can run on the dirt necessarily yet. I don't think she's proven it at this point that she can run at this caliber of field, especially because she's been running those small fields. She's been getting on the outside every time. Now she's in this 13 horse field where she's not going to be in front. She's going to have to take kickback. I don't like her at all. The Thorth Bader scares me a little bit. And then after that, it's just like, I don't know. If it could fall apart, it could be anyone. It could be the 6. It could be the 2. It could be. I think the 13 is interesting as a giant bomb to absolutely blow it up. She's going the right way, and she's going to finally get some pace, which she hasn't gone her last 3 trips. So if it's not the favorite, it could be absolutely anyone.
Yeah, you were spot on with another bomb like Regaled. Although I feel like some of her better efforts have come on the wet track, which we're certainly not going to get at Del Mar. For me, shortest price I would take on Seismic Beauty is probably 6 to 5. I don't know that I would want to take. I mean, even at 6 to 5, you're getting a little short, but I do believe that she's the most likely winner of this race. If you were to run it, 15 times, I think she wins probably 13, 14 of them, and I'm willing to take 6 to 5 on Seismic Beauty in here. But I will have a little bit. On those backup tickets sprinkled on Clicquot and Sarawak Rim as well. And then obviously Matt going with Alice Verite. Is there maybe an overlay price where if Seismic Beauty wasn't, taking as much money as the morning line would indicate that you would maybe be attracted to take a price on her?
Yeah, I could get involved pretty close to that morning line, 9 to 5, 2 to 1. I don't think she'll go that high. But I'd also say here I am saying I think it could be a bit of chaos. I think Jackson's point, if you have that opinion of a horse, and really any of these Breeders' Cup races, you have got such leverage because you already know whatever sequence this horse is in or this race is in. You're basically looking at it saying that's a single. I don't have to worry about it. I don't need to spend more capital than what I've got here. Single, put a ring around her, and then build out from there. I think I'm guilty of it. I know a lot of people are as well. We see these fields come together and we're trying to find bomb here, bomb here, bomb here. A short price that you can sink your teeth into, I think is just as valuable on a day like this as finding that 15 or 20 to 1 shot because you can build everything around it. So I like where Jackson's head's at. We may disagree on the merit, but I couldn't say anything bad about the way that he's going to lay it out. And again, if you like her at evens, you're probably going to get that. And I think it's a good send.
And just super quick, Matt, I'm not super familiar with, you mentioned third draft numbers with her earlier. Third draft takes ground loss into consideration. Is that correct? That's the big factor in third draft?
Yes.
So it's not a huge surprise then that she's not as big of a standout because she's always on the rails since she's speed. Is that?
Yeah, 100%. And the tough thing with thoroughgraph as well, you know enough with certain different racetracks that being outside is not always a bad thing. but
Right.
you get these sort of like, I don't want to say artificially inflated numbers, but you get some numbers that look a little sexier on paper than they actually are. So you have, and I've mentioned it with people that I work with at FanDuel frequently, the idea that there's nothing more than tools. There's not an end all be all. I'm a big believer in using multiple different figs. I've been looking at Brisnet over here on the side of the iPad. Buyer, I just use the racing form because that's what I came up using. But I factor in Thorograph. I use a computer program that won't come out until the night before the races. I think just use as many pieces of information at your disposal as possible, and then just juxtapose pros and cons. If everybody kind of lines up and says the same thing, okay, you got a pretty good number. If one of the two or three that you use is wildly different than the others, then I think you do a little bit more of a deep dive and you do some more homework. The one last thing I'll say, and I know we've talked about this race a lot, to Jackson's point, not just the fact that she may be the controlling speed and she's the fastest on paper, you can make the argument that she's actually taken on the best company. I mean, that run in the hearse, there were no Copians in this field. Say what you will about how far she wanted to go. I don't think the distance was really a problem for her. She just got beat by a better horse on the day, but there are no Copians in here. You take a look at Rishi, who's going to be a kind of interesting horse in the filly and mare sprint. Not only is she the fastest in the field, she's arguably the class of the field as well.
Excellent points from Matt Bernier there. And then, great way to lay out why you would play the favorite at even money, Jackson. We'll keep it moving into the Breeders' Cup Turf. Going is the next race in the sequence. We actually are going over a pick 3 in the middle of the card here. So it's probably the middle of the pick 5, maybe a pick 6, maybe a dirt pick 5. It's going to be so many wagers. You really got to pick your spots. We're going to start the conversation on the number 8 Mini Hawk. Coming in off of less than a month layoff since that last race, a really hard trying second in the ARC. Grade 1 over at Longchamp. Matt, do you think this filly, she's a 3-year-old filly, she's facing a war horse like Rebels Romance, who drew well on the rail, and we'll talk about the pace scenario in here, but do you think, maybe that bounce factor is possibly in play here? That race had to have taken something out of her, and this is a pretty quick turnaround.
That's my fear, but there are enough people that I've spoken to that I have far more faith in their view of European racing than my own, who seem to think that she's kind of breathing different air, that she is very clearly the best horse in this race, and it's really not even all that close. But man, I keep going through my head, and I think over soft ground to run her eyeballs out, she loses nothing in defeat. She basically won the race within the race. She just didn't get her picture taken. To come back now on 3.5, 4 weeks, Ainge are going to be taking on a horse in Rebels Romance, who this is his preferred turf. I mean, he wants fast ground, the proper fast ground, and you're going to get that obviously on Saturday. I just wonder, is she going to be a good bet at 7 or 8 to 5 compared to the, 5 to 2 that you might get on him? I don't know that I can say that definitively. She seems like she is all class. I'm going to use her. To me, this is not a race that you try to get cute in. You just kind of lock it up with the logical horses. But that is my big concern, is how much did that run over at Longchamp take out of her?
Yeah, that's got to be a concern. And a 3-year-old filly going against a 7-year-old male horse, I mean, that is quite a difference. And both of them are in, you could argue, the peak of their careers to this point. Jackson, do you fear that the bounce is a possibility here with Mini Hawk? And then what are your thoughts on her as your probably definite favorite in this race? Because along with Matt, we've heard a lot about this horse and how she appears to just be in a different atmosphere than a lot of these other horses.
I don't think I'm too worried about the bounce issue. To me, if that's just not something you can take into consideration. You're just guessing at that point. How are you supposed to know if the horse is going to bounce or not? I would more trust in the fact that they're here after that race. They think she's doing okay enough to ship her all the way across the world and to run in a race like this. They knew who would be out here waiting for them in Rebels Romance. So clearly they're confident enough in her to bring her out here. So that's not a problem for me. I just don't have a strong opinion between the two favorites. I'm kind of with Matt. I think they both have plenty of merit, and it's just tough to separate them. My bigger concern would be the pace for both of them. We kind of talked about earlier in the week that they have very similar running styles. Mini Hawk likes to be up close, as does Rebels Romance, as does Goliath. And those are your three favorites in this race, I believe, on the morning line. I know Goliath is up there. And I don't think it's completely crazy that they go a little too early and they really separate this field, and maybe that lands into something super chaotic from way out the back. I'm not banking on that to happen, but I do think it's a possibility that needs to be considered, because they do all have the same style. They all want to be in that same spot. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this pace unfolds.
I'm with you. The pace scenario in this race is a little bit tricky to kind of dissect. As your top three contenders, as you mentioned, they all like to be forward and they all like to have that pace. I'd imagine Rebels Romance from the rail probably going to get forward and get a little bit of position. And if a horse wants to, come over and get to the lead, he'll probably let that happen. But I would imagine William Buick is going to prioritize saving ground. Matt, I'm curious your thoughts. Goliath was supplemented to this race, obviously owned in part by John Stewart and Resolute Racing. He's campaigned this horse pretty much throughout the world: Japan, Hong Kong, France, Germany. Danced kind of every dance. Now finally making his way to the States. What do you make of his chances? 8-1 is obviously fair, but as Jackson mentioned, going to be an early pace presence in here.
I mean, not dissimilar from Rebels Romance, right? I mean, a gelding kind of gone all over the place. Typically doesn't need his track to come with him. He can just kind of run over whatever you've got. Prefers probably a little bit, firmer going. Although having said that, Goliath has at least shown a willingness to run over some ground with some cut in it. Rebels Romance, I believe his record is 6 for 7 over good to firm or firm going. So this is very clearly what he wants to do. And maybe I should have sort of phrased it a little bit better when I say take the logical horses in here. To me, it's the top two. You've got Rebels Romance, you've got Mini Hawk, and then I would include Goliath in sort of the B tier. I agree with the way you guys have laid out the pace. And that's another thing that enough of the folks that I've spoken to coming over from Europe have voiced concerns about, that maybe your two favorites hook up, I don't know, as early as 5/8 and they start racing a little too early. And if that's the case, I wouldn't sleep on Amalok 3. This horse is coming out of a run in the St. Ledger at a longer distance over, I don't want to say testing ground, but there was definitely some give in it. You can see some divots coming up. If the race were run at 1.5 miles, granted, Alrifa's probably a little bit closer in that instance, but at 1.5 miles, Amalok wins. That was the first time he'd ever lost. He's a 3-year-old that I think is just getting better. That was also his first start since the middle of June at Royal Ascot. So Amalok is not a horse that is going to be as prominent as those other horses that we've talked about. So if you get a little racy early on, I'm definitely going to have at least a little piece of this horse underneath it, and maybe in some of the other tickets to use as far as the multis are concerned, just in case the favorites go a little bit hot and heavy too early, and then suddenly this horse comes from the back.
I certainly agree with that. The point on Amalok, and you mentioned the going in the St. Ledger, and I saw something earlier today that made me do some deeper research into this, and it was listed as good to yielding, and even soft and yielding with soft in places. So the listing of that turf, I wonder a little bit about if it really was good. Of course, even good in Ireland compared to here is pretty much yielding to. It's an off the turf day here. We wouldn't touch that turf at all. So. Certainly some cut in the ground there. You mentioned the farthest distance he had traveled to that point. So you got to like the post position drawn. You have to like, there is some other pace presence. So I'm with you. I think Amalok and Goliath, both in that kind of B tier of horses. Amalok probably has that preferred running style, because Goliath, you'd have to imagine, would get caught up in some of that early pace as well. Jackson, what were your thoughts on the Breeders' Cup turf in here?
No, I mean, I don't have a huge opinion here. And I do not play trifectas. I can probably count on one hand the number of trifectas I've played this year. I'm playing tries with Gold Phoenix in third. I don't care. This is his year. He has never come into this race as good as he has coming into this year's. And it's not like he ran poorly last year or the year prior. He ran fourth both of those years. And last year he didn't get a great trip in there either. He was always wide and still held on for fourth. He's not beating the best of Rebels Romance. He's not being the best of Mini Hawk. There's just no way it's going to happen. But if you're looking for a way to blow up these exotics a little bit, we mentioned the pace could potentially get a little bit hotter than expected. He'd be one that would certainly be able to take advantage of it and come picking up the pieces late.
Without a doubt, Jackson, I hope you know I did set you up. You took that the exact direction I wanted you to take that. I didn't want to just give you Gold Phoenix in your right into your lap there, but I did want to hope that you would touch on that, because you mentioned Gold Phoenix. He actually won the John Henry Turf Cup this year. Normally just like a jog around there.
Best win in a long time.
He looked good turning for home and getting that victory. Obviously, you meet some better company than Stay Hot and Spycatcher, but the only American to beat him home in a Breeders' Cup race was Up to the Mark, and you could argue that was the best American turfer in quite some time that we've had. So certainly the merit is there, and Phil D'Amato knows how to get them ready, and this is over his home track. So you got to love his chances in here. Jackson is going to play his first trifecta in who knows how long, but best of luck. Do you have any long shots that have caught your eye in here, Matt? Obviously, Amalok at 10-1 is one that could pick up the pieces. Is there anybody that could really, throw a wrench into your works?
Well, I would certainly include Gold Phoenix. I am a resident fan. I actually have one of the GFP hats at home. courtesy of Billy through Christina Blacker. But look, he's a cool horse. He shows up and runs. I wasn't out here last year, but I picked him in the turf. Maybe that sounded crazy, but he ran well again. He just shows up and runs, and he loves it here. He would not be a surprise whatsoever to see hit the board. I agree with what Jackson said. I mean, it seems, implausible that he's going to be all of the Europeans, but why can't he split them? Why can't he be the one that comes and cashes a big check in here? And if you're playing those exotics, kind of sprinkle him throughout. I guess the only other one I would throw in there, I'm not a fan of Wimbledon Hawkeye. I know some people think he's a little bit interesting. From a pace standpoint, it showed that he can't go and run down Rebels Romance. I wonder if Flavien Prat is on ascend with redistricting. And I don't know if he's good enough to win this race, but he's not a bad horse. And ever since they stretched him out, this is really a horse that's kind of started to fulfill that potential. Chad had talked about him when he came back down at the fairgrounds. That was a race, if I'm not mistaken, that Spirit of St. Louis was also in, who had just won the Pegasus. And we had kind of heard at the set, Chad was saying, like, no, this is the horse. It's not the other one. And, it didn't work out in the Muniz. And then you come back in the Turf Classic and he ran fine, but not great. And then they stretch him out a little bit more, and he's kind of come to life here. I don't think he can win sitting, but if they're aggressive with him and they just say, look, we're on a send mission, make everybody else blink, I think he can get Brave out there. Don't know if he can win, but I think he can get a piece.
Yeah, I don't hate that take at all. And we've seen how tough it is to pass a Chad Brown horse in the stretch. Like, Flavien Prat's going to get him out there. He's great at rationing that speed and saving something for down the lane. He rides the Del Mar turf course pretty well. He ran it so well that he left to go to the East Coast and dominate that riding colony, which is miles tougher than it is out here. So Flavien Prat and redistricting, certainly a big threat in here. We'll move on to the next race in the sequence, which happens to be race number 9. It's the Breeders' Cup Classic, going 10 furlongs, obviously the classic distance. Rail draw of Fierceness. Your favorite is Sovereignty. And we won't obviously, we heard the news this morning with the fever last night of Sovereignty. We'll handicap and give our picks and everything that he's in the race and he's running. Obviously, that's what we all hope for, and we know that if he's not, it's out of the best interest of the horse, which is of paramount importance. But Matt, this is one of the most competitive Breeders' Cup Classics I've ever seen since I've followed racing. I don't know your thoughts on that, but certainly without getting caught up in the hyperbole of it all, this is the race of the year, hands down, and the talent top to bottom is insane. It's going to be so fun to watch, and I hope we get a showdown. How did you view this race? The pace, obviously, we mentioned at the beginning of the show with the rabbit in contrary thinking, and maybe that makes things a little bit tougher on Fierceness. But what excites you most, I guess, about this race?
Well, I think just the merit, right? The idea that you've got the top 3 finishers from last year's race who have all subsequently come out of it to win grade 1s internationally here as 4-year-olds. You've got the 3 winners of the Triple Crown races this year. And then on top of that, aside from the rabbit, you've got multiple other grade 1 winners this year alone coming in. I mean, I don't know what else you could possibly ask for in a race like this, other than, knock wood, to your point, we hope Sovereignty gets to go. From a handicapping standpoint, the post draw, we talked about it at the top. It seemed impossible that Fierceness would end up down there again, and here we are. And now I think that changes the dynamic of this race quite a bit, because this was always going to be a fast pace. It was going to be a race your closers had their chances because of the presence of the rabbit, but now I think even more so. Now I think really this is a race that maybe if you're a Fierceness, you got to be miles the best to win this thing. But if you're anybody else, if you're at your best, you should probably get a very favorable setup in here, because you're going to have the rabbit go out there with Fierceness, and then everybody else can kind of settle into their spots. I don't know where you guys land on Sierra Leone. I don't know why he's never really been my cup of tea. Probably because he's a closer on dirt, and I just really kind of despise those horses. But he's very good. He's as good as he's ever been. He's going to get his setup from his buddy in here. It wouldn't surprise me if he won this race. I'm not going to be touching him with a 10-foot pole. I won't have him on any tickets. If that costs me, that costs me. Mind frame, I know he wanted a mile and an eighth. For whatever reason, it's stuck in my head that he's more of a one-turn horse. I know he almost won the Belmont last year as a 3-year-old, but I've always had reservations about how far he really wants to go. I am more and more interested in Antiquarian. And I know he looks trying to think of the right way of saying this without offending anyone. Not as good as others. I think he's getting good at the right time, though. And if you like Sierra Leone, and I know he had to overcome the issue in the Jockey Club, he had to avoid Irad, who had gotten thrown from Mindframe. Antiquarian still finished in 24 and change for the final quarter. It's not like he was slowing down. No, Sierra Leone couldn't get to him and he was compromised his chances. I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that I think there's that much of a gap between a Sierra Leone and an Antiquarian at this point. And I mean, just purely on last out buyers in the field, other than Sovereignty and Fierceness, and even Fierceness didn't run a 108. I mean, he's got the second fastest buyer in the field for the last run. It was at 1.25 miles, and it was against pretty decent company. Um, I he's not the likeliest winner, but I keep finding myself coming back to him saying, I think he's going to work out a good trip. He's going to be a playable price. He can't be any shorter than 10-1. I think I'm going to go to Antiquarian, which if you had told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have said, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. If you had told me that 2 months ago, I would have said, like, please stop, get away from me. And here I am. I'm going to pick Antiquarian and probably bet him. And probably bet him heavily because it'll be a decent price.
He's going to be a very decent price. And I don't hate your analysis on him at all. I do think he's going to sit a very favorable trip, especially given the way the pace scenario is going to play out in here. I'll touch on Sierra Leone before I pass it to you, Jackson. This horse has finished in the trifecta in all 13 of his starts. He's obviously very impressive. And I think the farther he goes, the better. He does only have one win at the 1.25 mile distance, but it was in this race last year. They went the suicidal pace up front. He's a tough horse. I mean, Jackson, a week ago, we were doing our show, and I was all over Sierra Leone. I was like, I can't wait to bet this horse, this, that, and the other. And then, I don't know. I just
tell them what really happened, Brian. Tell them what really happened.
What did really happen? I honestly, I don't know what
you're
became
a horse flesh expert overnight.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, you're right. Yes. So I did all of a sudden yes, I did all of a sudden get my master's in horse flesh viewing. No, I've been able to be at the track all week so far, both helping FanDuel and Breeders' Cup in Del Mar. Getting to see Sovereignty on the track, I mean, he looks like he breathes different air. It's nuts. I know that. Again, I'm no expert on how a horse looks, but when I can notice a standout among A-plus caliber horses, I just wanted to take note of that. Obviously, Sovereignty, I'm not saying anything that everybody doesn't already know. He's a fantastic animal. For him to do this as a 3-year-old is super impressive. And that win in the Travers, if he gets anywhere close to that effort, everybody else is running for a distant second. All that to say, even after seeing him in person, the horse I ended up with was Forever Young. I feel like last year he didn't get enough credit for that Breeders' Cup Classic that he ran, where Fierceness stayed up close to that hot pace, but so did Forever Young. And all the other horses that finished anywhere in the top 6 or 7 came from way, way out of it. And Forever Young has so much heart. Jackson's brought up a great point with his run in the Saudi Cup. He had every reason to just back up and finish last that day. He was in a basically 4 wide across duel the entire time on the backstretch. He rallied, Romantic Warrior basically came over, made it a little tight on him. He got over, switched out, and then came with that run. He made 3 or 4 different moves, and he just never gave up. And Romantic Warrior, while maybe that wasn't his best distance, that's a very, very talented horse. And he was up in the top 3 or 4 of the world rankings at that time of the race. So he beat a real horse. He came right back and finished, a third in the Dubai World Cup behind Mixto and Hit Show. I guess, shout out to the intro for this video for Mixto, but who knows about that race, but they gave him the summer off. Japan gets hot, so typically they don't run as much during the summer months. Came out about a month ago, went the 1.1 miles just as a prep for this race. This race has been circled for them. Pace scenario favors him. He can sit wherever. I think he's going to set another really favorable trip in here, and I think he gets the jump on everybody else. I think he runs down Fierceness. Obviously, he's going to run down the Rabbit, and I think he's going to be really, really hard to hold off. So my pick in here has got to be Forever Young based on all that. But I do love what you said on Antiquarian, because I do think he also sits the right kind of trip, and he's going to be a more playable price than Forever Young and, Sovereignty and Sierra Leone, Fierceness, all of those. He's going to be up there, and he is certainly on the improve, and he's a little bit underexposed in that sense.
I will say, if you're a thoroughgraph player, the single best piece of form that any one of these horses has is that Saudi Cup. I believe he ran a -5, which is like off the charts fast. You're flirting with like flight line kind of territory with those kind of numbers. He's exceptional. There's nothing to knock about Forever Young. I, he's one. I'm increasingly getting close, and we'll see what happens with Sovereignty. Again, knock wood, he ends up running. But even if he does, I'm probably a little more inclined now to take a little bit of a shot against him. And if I've voiced my concerns about fierceness with the rail, and I don't really love Sierra Leone, this is suddenly a race where I'm looking at it saying, "Give me Forever Young, give me Antiquarian." I don't really love Mind Frame. Baeza, can we talk about Baeza in journalism?
Yes.
Because so journalism, let's I guess start with him. I just don't think he's gotten better. And that's not a knock. It is what it is. He's a nice horse. He keeps running really competitive races. I am fascinated by the folks that think that the rider change is going to make some enormous difference. Maybe I'm wildly underestimating the difference from Jose to Umbi, but I think the horse just kind of runs his race, and that's fine. I don't think it's good enough to win. Then maybe he's going to get a pace set up and whatever. Maybe that's my piece with him. I just don't know that he's gotten appreciably better. Baeza, conversely, I think is getting much better, but I still don't know if it's good enough to win this race, is it?
I'll start on journalism real quick because my thoughts for the jockey change, less that journalism is going to run the same style and somehow be better. I just thought maybe Jose is a little bit more aggressive of a rider than Umberto Rispoli, so maybe tries to get him a little bit closer. I don't know that makes a difference in where he's going to finish because, again, you mentioned, I think he may have plateaued. I think the only maybe angle that you could look at is that he's had finally some time off from the very, very hard campaign that he started back in March. He ran pretty much once a month, sometimes even more frequent during the Triple Crown run. So he had no time off, and he danced every dance. He traveled across the country, and finally he's had a little bit of time to take some rest and mature. But so has Sierra Leone, so has Sovereignty, so has Fierceness. So you can't really use that and say all of a sudden he's just going to mature better. And, he did so much better in this time off. Maybe he's a little bit fresher. Maybe he's a little bit closer. But I'm with you. I don't think that his best run or I think we've already maybe seen his best run and seen kind of his ceiling. And then to Baeza, Jackson, I'll turn it over to you, an improving horse, obviously, who just won the PA Derby.
He's fine. He might be improving. I always struggle with him to do what to do with the parks for him. I mean, we saw Barnes run horrible there, come back and ran a 110 or whatever it was. And then someone did the same thing last week. Like, I don't know what to do with it. And it wasn't even that fast. He's not that tactical. So every scenario where he gets a good setup, Sierra Leone also gets a really good setup. And I think Sierra Leone is just way better than he is. And the same could be said for Sovereignty if Sovereignty runs in this race too. And that could also be the same argument for journalism. I think people got in their heads that journalism has like some tactical speed when he just doesn't. When he faces horses that are this good, like he's going to be in the same trip where he's going to be towards the back half of the field. And if it does set up for a horse from the back of the pack, Sierra Leone, I think, is by far the best closer. And I'm not even saying I like Sierra Leone in this race. I just think journalism is going to have a very difficult time finding its way to the winner's circle.
Yeah, he is in a tough spot because when you have, a horse to catch like Sovereignty in front of you and a horse to, not run you down behind you in Sierra Leone, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place there. I don't know how you come out on top, but Matt, thank you again for joining us and taking the time out of your busy week. Breeders' Cup Classic, Breeders' Cup in general, 14 fantastic races. Obviously, the post draw for Friday, those two big Aidan O'Brien horses in Precise and Stad both got, kind of the short end of the stick for the post position draw there, getting 13 and 14 respectively. And then, we talked about Fierceness, ironically drawing the rail again on what seemed like an impossible scenario. For the rest of the card and the races that we haven't talked about, the 11 others, is there a horse or a race that you're most looking forward to, maybe outside of the Breeders' Cup Classic, either in terms of competition or star power?
I would say star power. He'll be a really short price, and I hate to give out chalk in a Breeders' Cup or kind of an obvious horse, but like in the sprint, it's Ben Tornado's race to lose. I would be very surprised if he shows up and runs anything close to what he did at Churchill back in September. I just don't think anybody else in that field is capable of doing that sort of thing. So he's, one of those short prices that I'm just kind of interested in getting stuck into. I have always loved Rhetorical, and I'm going to go right back to him in the mile. I know he's taking on good company again in this spot, and maybe some people have questions. I don't. I just think this horse is getting better and better. He was close enough to the hot pace there in the mile at Keeneland and still had enough of a kick at the end to hold off the likes of John Quill and Program Trading. Program Trading, I thought, had a beautiful trip and just couldn't run him down on the square. So I think he's a horse that I'm really looking forward to seeing on Saturday. And then as far as Friday goes, I think the juvenile fillies. I think the fillies are a bit of a hot mess. I don't think any of them are all that good. I was very disappointed to see that Tommy Joe didn't continue on the way that I would have hoped. Percy's Bar ran a good race, but she was ready to lay down at the end of that too. So I'm probably going to take a stab with John Sadler's horse in there, Super Corridora, just because I don't love any of the other proven commodities, and I thought her 2-turn race was really nice. And then we'll find out what we get from the boys. The fact that Ted Noffey draws right next to Brant, I have to think that they're going to be cognizant not to let Brant go. I still don't know how far I think Brant wants to go. Mile and 16th, probably you can get it, but beyond that, your guess is as good as mine. I'm going to go back to Ken McPeak's horse. I thought Blackout Time ran fine at Keeneland, and immediately afterward, Ken said, we're going to wait for the run at Churchill. This wasn't even, we're not going to rush him. We don't need to do this. And for him to be here, I think is probably it's not just a vote of confidence. I think it's an extreme vote of confidence, because as confident a horseman as Kenny is, he's also not going to do, if he doesn't think he has a chance to win, he's not going to run here. He's going to wait and be one of the favorites, when we get to Louisville in a few weeks. But instead they're here, and I think he could turn the tables if the pace scenario unfolds a little bit differently.
Yeah, excellent analysis. I'm with you on Blackout Time a little bit there. I do think that's a bit of an interesting horse along with Intrepido. Jackson, any parting thoughts? And thank you again, Matt, for the time. I'll check in with the chat while Jackson gives his parting thoughts here.
Nothing crazy. Just I'm really looking forward to this weekend, especially Saturday. I mean, I thought all 9 races on Saturday came up just exceptional, as you'd expect for the Breeders' Cup. So going to be a ton of fun.
It is going to be a ton of fun. 14 fantastic races that we have on tap. Matt, have a great rest of your night. I know I'm sure you have an early morning tomorrow. And then obviously we have a few more days until championship racing begins at Del Mar. Best of luck to you. I'm sure I'll see you around the track. This has been our final show tonight on the Gallop Out. We were like 7 shows deep or something. So thank you, everybody, for all the incredible support. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel over at the Gallop Out. Give us a like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, because we're back tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific, with Andy Serling. That's going to be a ton of fun. We love having him on. But, Matt, thank you again for joining us and making the time. That has been Jackson Muniz. I'm Ryan Anderson. Have a good night. Thank you.